Imagine being 3 months into open ocean with no land in sight, and the only water you have left has turned into a thick black gelatinous slime sitting at the bottom of an oak barrel. It smells like something died inside it, and because something did, hundreds of somethings, and you still have to drink it or die of thirst before you ever see shore again. This was not a rare emergency on 18th century sailing vessels. This was Tuesday. The wooden casks that stored fresh water on ships like British men of war were essentially biological time bombs. Within days of departure, warmth, darkness, and stagnant conditions inside those oak staves created the perfect breeding ground for algae blooms, bacterial colonies, and the kind of microbial horror that would make a modern health inspector weep. Under tropical sun, the water didn't just go bad, it transformed. Sailors described it as ropey, a term they used to capture that stomach-turning moment when water stopped flowing and started stretching. Green films crept across the surface. The liquid darkened. The smell became a physical presence. Men who drank from these barrels without treatment developed violent dysentery, cramps, fever, and in too many cases, a burial at sea with nothing but rope and canvas for a coffin. The ships that survived the longest voyage, the ones that actually returned, had figured something out. And the answer wasn't cleaner barrels or better wood. It was something sharp, aggressive, and ancient. The ships that kept vinegar in their stores were, without knowing the mechanism, conducting primitive water sanitation on a mass scale. There is another layer to this story that most people never hear. 18th century naval surgeons, operating without any understanding of germ theory, had developed their own theory of why men got sick at sea. They called it alkaline rot. The belief, based largely on observation rather than science, was that months of eating salted, preserved, cooked-to-death rations threw the body's internal chemistry out of balance, making the blood and tissues too alkaline, too passive, too vulnerable to decay. Their solution was to acidify the body from the inside. This sounds almost medieval, but here's the remarkable thing: they weren't entirely wrong. Modern research into gut microbiome health shows that fermented, acidic foods genuinely do support the balance of gut flora during periods of severe nutritional stress. The sailors consuming vinegar-based rations weren't just treating their water. They were entirely by accident supporting the microbial ecosystem in their own digestive tracts, helping their bodies process what little nutrition they were getting from their miserable diet of hardtack and salt pork. The men who drank their switchel and their shrub regularly were, in a very real physiological sense, keeping their gut alive when everything around them was trying to make it fail. Now we get to the part that should genuinely shock you. Because vinegar's role in 18th century maritime survival didn't stop at water sanitation and gut support, some of the most forward-thinking naval surgeons of the era were using vinegar as a delivery system for something even more critical: vitamin C. The technique, almost completely forgotten today, involved infusing vinegar with foraged plant matter: pine needles, wild sorrel, dried rose hips, spruce bark. These ingredients were packed into clay jars or wooden containers and submerged in vinegar for weeks, essentially creating a shelf-stable, acid-preserved botanical extract. The acidity of the vinegar acted as a preservation medium, protecting the vitamin C content of the plant material from the oxidation that would otherwise destroy it within days. Ships that carried these infused vinegar rations showed measurably better survival rates against scurvy, the disease caused by vitamin C deficiency that killed more sailors in the age of sail than storms, battles, and shipwrecks combined. Scurvy didn't kill quickly. It was a slow, humiliating collapse. Gums turned black and swollen, old wounds that had healed years before reopened. Bones ached with a depth that no pain a modern person has experienced can really compare to. Men wept, men lost their teeth, men simply stopped being able to move, and then stopped being able to breathe. The ships with vinegar infusions buried fewer men at sea. The data was visible even to admirals who had no scientific framework to explain it, so they kept ordering the vinegar. We rebuilt this ration from the ground up using period-accurate methods. Unfiltered apple cider vinegar fermented for 8 weeks in a ceramic crock. Molasses sourced the way colonial sailors would have, thick, dark, mineral-rich, dried ginger root, and for the infusion element, dried pine needles and rosehip soaked in the vinegar for 3 weeks before straining. The result, mixed with water at a ratio of roughly 1 part switchel concentrate to 6 parts water, is, and this is the part that genuinely surprises everyone, not unpleasant. It is sharp, yes. There's a clean, aggressive sourness to it. But it is also cooling in a way that plain water is not, which makes immediate physiological sense. The acidity triggers salivation and stomach acid production, jump-starting digestion that months of poor nutrition has partially shut down. The ginger provides real warmth and anti-nausea effect. The molasses delivers iron and potassium that salted rations strip away. Standing on a dock in full sun, drinking this, you begin to understand something. This wasn't punishment. This was survival intelligence dressed up as a beverage. What 18th century sailors built with vinegar, fermentation, and desperate ingenuity was, in a very real sense, the foundation of modern food safety science. The principles that Pasteur and later food scientists would formalize, acid as preservative pH, as a barrier to microbial growth, fermentation as a method of nutritional stabilization. All of these were being practiced on the open ocean by men who couldn't read and had never heard of a bacterium. They survived because they paid attention. They noticed what worked and what killed their shipmates. They passed knowledge from one voyage to the next in the form of ration lists and supply manifests and the quiet wisdom of old boatswains who had crossed the Atlantic enough times to know that the vinegar barrel was worth more than the rum. That instinct, to look at the natural world and ask what keeps us alive, is the oldest and most important survival skill the human species has ever developed. And it didn't start in a laboratory. It started on a ship, in the dark, with a man holding a cup of something sharp and sour, choosing to drink it anyway because he wanted to see home again. If this kind of survival history hits different for you, the real, lived, biological desperation of people who had no safety net except their own intelligence, then you're exactly who the survival historian was made for. Hit like if this changed how you think about what survival actually looks like. Share it with someone who thinks history is boring, and let's fix that. And subscribe, because we are just getting started on the stories that textbooks never told you.